leading up to going into the city, once Ferris, Cameron, and Sloan are now in Cameron's dad's Ferrari, driving into Chicago. They're gonna have lunch at this prestigious restaurant, which again I forget the name of. But then they're
Oh, it's Chez Louis.
the what was it?
Chez Louis. It's a
Is that what
French
it
restaurant.
is? Okay, okay,
Yeah.
okay. So they end up meeting. They have like an exchange with a very snooty host,
You mean
which
Snog?
which for good reason. If you see these kids going into a place like this, immediately they don't feel like they fit. But Ferris finds a way to, look at their guest list as the host is distracted by, I believe. Now, is that the part where the phone call happens? Doesn't he have Cameron call first? Or
No,
no?
basically the host was already just like almost like as if he had seated at a table and he was coming back.
Mm-hmm.
And then the exchange happens. And then he's just like, you know what? I'll call the police myself because you want to kick me out. And basically what he does is he just calls um, he finds that there's another phone in the building and he sees the extension number and he just calls that extension so
Oh,
that
that's
it
right.
rings somewhere else. And then he just goes, well, you can go pick it up somewhere else. And that's how he's able to, he'll pick up the main line, and then that's when Fry comes in, or no, like not Fry. That's when Sloan starts describing him as Abe Foreman, and then this is where Ferris is playing 4D chess. He's going, oh, I know he's going to pick up my line and hear my conversation. And the second he does that, he has Fry calling to the phone. He goes, "This is Sergeant Peterson with the local police."
So, needless to say, their scheme works. They get seated at a table with Ferris and his group being disguised as Abe Roman and guests. And it's so funny, like, looking back at this scene, you can see, like, Cameron, it feels out of place. And the camera focuses a lot on Cameron during this scene. You see him, like, I don't know what he's doing. Like, is he, like, drinking water and then squeezing it between his teeth? He's making some
Well,
sort of.
Ferris does it first successfully, and then Fry does his interpretation of it, which causes everyone to stare at him. And then he starts like coughing,
Yo!
like this. Well, it also doesn't help that he's wearing a Detroit Red Wings jersey, and it's like, what the hell is this kid doing here?
Yeah, exactly. Like, this is formal
He's
dining. What are you doing coming here with a jersey?
like, who is this kid?
Yeah. And so they have their lunch, and then meanwhile, a side story is the valet driver that was entrusted to park the Ferrari ends up getting his buddy, and they end up going on a joyride all around town. And I mean, what's funny about that scene specifically is where have we seen that mimicked before? It's a cartoon claymation, you know it.
Yeah, it's from Chicken, but
Robot Chicken.
it's also referenced from another film, which I don't know the film.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Ah, I don't know either, but it is interesting that this movie has found ways to make its way into other pop culture references. And Robot Chicken being one of them. That I mean, it's a really silly show, but there are so many short skits in that show that are memorable and also dark. But God, I mean, Seth Green was really creative with that show. Kudos to him. But so we have the three companions, and now they're driving from lunch. It's like, okay, well, the day is not over yet. Let's go. Let's go.
well, which also, by the way, they almost get caught by their dad.
Right. That's
4,800
right.
restaurants in the downtown area. My dad decides to go to the one I'm eating at.
Yeah, exactly. And but they're not in the obviously they're not in the Ferrari at this point. They're taking a cab. And yeah, the cab like pulls in traffic, pulls up right next to where their dad is. And then Cameron and Ferris they dip down on the seat trying to hide from the windows view. And the dad looks over and sees Sloane there, and and Ferris is even asking like, "What's he doing?" She's like, "Oh, he's making obscene gestures."
Which, by the way, I'm surprised that the dad doesn't recognize Ferris's girlfriend.
That's what I was curious about too.
He's
Is
also kind of creeping up on her. I'm like, oh, come on, old man.
yeah, like he has no idea who she is, right? I mean,
But I
he
do think that's later in the film. I think that's after. I think that's after a certain point.
is
At the
that when they're
restaurant,
is that after maybe okay, so maybe they go to the art museum and then after the parade, maybe that's when that happens. I know it.
yeah, because at the art museum they go, "Oh, I haven't seen nothing good," and then that's when that dialogue happens. This is just him getting in the cab period to start continuing the day.
Okay. For some
Because
reason,
there's still, yeah, because they, well, I mean, they go, what is it? They go to the skyscraper, they go to the restaurant, they go to the museum. They have the montage, which I love that song of them just kind of reflecting in that museum,
it's
just being kids, just enjoying themselves. I love that song.
you know what's interesting? I don't know if it's accurate, but it sounds like a song that the band The Smiths played, but there's no vocals. It's just instrumental.
Mhm.
And I'm pretty sure it matches with a song I know that's played by The Smiths. So I don't know if it is that song. I'll be curious to see if it is. But yeah, and again, kind of like what I was saying earlier, like I really feel like this film can also be an homage to just the city of Chicago, with how much ground they're able to cover, and the scenes that just show the city skyline, like from a bird's eye perspective. Like there's a couple of those scenes, so that's one of the reasons why I think like Chicago can also be listed as like a character in this film, because they wanted to like show all the nice parts about it.
Oh my God, it is by the Smiths.
It is right. Yeah, I
It's a
figured.
cover of "Please, Please, Please Let Me Get What I Want" by the
Let
Smiths.
me, let me, let me, let me get what I want this time. Yeah, that's the song.
Yeah.
I knew it was. I'm like, I've heard the song before. um, but okay, cool. So
And by the way, I do like when he challenges his girlfriend. He's like, "Why would she get married?" He's like, "Well, why not? Other than these reasons, tell me a good reason why not."
oh, yeah, because that's when they end up going to they go
The
to the
Chicago,
stock trading building, right?
yeah.
Okay.
They also go there.
Yeah, they go there. They even go to a baseball game. I forgot about that. And at the baseball game, they're I think isn't it on the billboard? Because we see it referenced a couple times, like "Save Ferris" in the background. That's on the water
Yeah,
tower, I think.
yeah. It's a
Um,
nice little like kind of play off that they keep doing throughout the whole. Oh, it's so funny.
which is
Well, and, and the best part about that game, and I know we're kind of bouncing around the whole like
it's all
kind
good,
of
brother.
sense, but that's when Rooney goes to the pizza joint and
Yes.
he says arguably my favorite effing line with the conversation with the guy, the cook in the back, and he's all like, "Who's playing?" And it was like Cubs and I don't know who the other plays. It's like
The
Cubs and Dodgers.
Bears.
No, Cubs and Dodgers zip zip. And then he's like, "Who's winning?" And he just goes, "The Bears." And I just laugh because then they cut to Ferris on the TV catching the ball, and then the second he looks, he misses him.
Right.
I'm
Right.
like, God, I love that nice little burn right
Oh,
there.
and then in that same scene, Edward Rooney thinks he's found Ferris, looking only from behind this character who we already know is not Ferris, but from behind the hairstyle matches, the sweater vest kind of matches, and Edward Rooney like goes up to that person's like, "Your ass is mine." And then that's when he gets like the drink thrown. Is it? I think it's a drink that's thrown in his face, or
No,
is it?
she like spits a soda in his face.
Okay, something like yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, that's what it is. Um, but yeah, and he's like, okay, darn, I missed him in this one. But he's looking at all the places that he thinks high school kids would spend time at, which he is correct, but not Ferris. Ferris is on a totally different game.
Catches the ball, and he's like, "Oh, I think I broke my thumb," which they never bring that up again. and then they kind of have like a dialogue, and so they kind of have that moment. I don't think they really talk about anything. Oh, you know what they? Oh, you know that's what it is. Is he goes? I think that's when they were like, you know where we would be right now at school, and then it shows the PE
In
class.
PE class, yep.
And they're just like, come on, boy, come on, I'm gonna be here all day. And then
It
the
is
daughter's
true.
like, screw them.
Like they're both happy about like where they don't have to be right now, missing out. Is it on the cab ride home that Cameron says, like I haven't seen anything like great
Yeah.
today? And Ferris is
Uh-huh.
like, what do you mean you haven't seen? Like we had pancreas. We ate pancreas in the restaurant. Like we've
We saw priceless works of art.
yeah. And so it's Cameron is showing the emotions of just not being enthused. Like he's still in deep of himself, like too deep in his thoughts. And we get to the point where there's a parade going on, and Ferris is like, "Okay, well, I'm gonna show you. Like, I'm gonna show you something great. Then I'm not gonna let you go home until you feel like you've had a great day." And that's what I also love about Ferris's character is he wants to make sure that people can understand life from his perspective, and because Cameron does take things way too seriously, and
And also, he's acting like an audience member. Like he's acting like his whole time while he's doing this, he feels like he's being dragged around
mm-hmm.
rather than being a part of the group.
Yes, no, that's so good that you mentioned that. No, I 100% agree. He just feels like he's a passenger to his own life almost.
That and to that day, so that's when he's all like, I haven't seen anything good because, he's already feeling he's being dragged around. So he's just kind of just criticizing and just being a Debbie Downer.
Being
And then,
dragged around and being used.
yeah, even though he's having a great time, he just maybe it's his lack of control and how he copes with it. And then that's when, they're like, where did he go? And you can even see it in his frustration because they're literally at the parade and he's panicked that he's like, oh, he left us, he did this. And, like he's screwing me over. Like, and he gets to do whatever he wants and I don't get to do anything. And like, it's just kind of extending that conversation and really letting him open up and kind of sharing his frustration.
Yeah.
And then that's when, after he's kind of let that out and had that assumption, that's when the assumptions kind of flipped over with Ferris being like, oh, I'm doing this song because my friend doesn't think he's seen anything good today. And again, he does this thing where it's just you're being active in the moment. It's not like you're being this observer or just indulging in the day-to-day things. It's this like active kind of just being alive, being present. Again, the present theme where everyone's dancing, everyone's having a good time. They all rush the street and they just start having this great moment. And it's just you just want to be a part of it. It's not something you could just watch. You have to be in it.
Yep.
And then when the energy turns for him, or it starts to turn for him, that's where he starts to kind of get his joy.
Yeah, and when they're after the parade and I actually like that because even in the beginning of the film when Ferris is having like the whole intro monologue while he's getting ready for the day, he's singing because we hear Donkashay the song, um, like we hear it throughout the film.
He sings it in the shower in the very
He
beginning.
sings it in the shower,
He's already kind of referencing it.
right? And I think another character, I don't remember if it's Genie or another character that sings it throughout the song, throughout the movie. But then he chooses to sing this song, and everyone's parading. He's on the center stage. Obviously, this is being recorded somehow. So proof of him being out in the world on a day that he should be at school is already out there. But does he care? No, he doesn't care. Um, and after that song, he sings a rendition of Twist and Shout. Um, and that's what gets the crowd really going. And Cameron and, Sloan are on the sidelines. They're like, he's crazy. And and they even mention like, okay, well you're definitely getting caught for sure now. Like everyone's seen you. Ferris doesn't spend any time throughout this film being worried. I think the only moment of concern that we see with him, like a genuine level of concern, is at the end, like really at the end when he's confronted with Ed Rooney. like at his house.
Um,
I think that's the only like visible expression that he has of "oh fuck, I've been made."
Also, when Fry's car gets destroyed, he goes like,
Oh,
"Hey."
that was out of pure shock, I think.
Well, he just was like, "You don't want this much heat, brother. Like, let me take it on. Like, I don't want you. Like this is too much development for you. You don't want it that quick."
Yeah.
But he also has like concerns, but they're just kind of more reactionary concerns when he sees like his parents
Yeah.
or his dad. Yeah, he does this whole parade, and they're just in shock that he's doing it, and then he just kind of keeps leaning in, and then I think he wins like a staff or a trophy or something, and that's when they start heading back to the car, which I think everyone was expecting that car to be trashed.
I was
Um,
too when I first watched this. I'm like, dude, that car is going to be ruined.
and then it doesn't, and I think everyone's just so suspicious. They're like, okay, it hasn't been trashed. It should have been trashed. They have this, you know, Fry freaks out when he finds out that a whole bunch of mileage has been added on top of the car, and he goes into this shock. Which, in hindsight, like especially for us, it's like that's not a big deal, but for him, especially when you're a teenager, everything's a huge deal.
Mhm.
Um, and they do a bit where they're on the lake, and he's just kind of in shock, and then they're at the pool, and he's just which, by the way, why would you seat your friend at the edge of a diving board if he is like not even consciously aware of his surroundings? They're just like, hey, we're gonna put him in this suit, and then we're gonna put a chair at the edge of the diving board, and it like he could easily fall over. So it's just like the fact that they're concerned when he falls in. I'm like, why did you put him there in the first place? Like,
Whose
I don't get it.
whose house was it that they were at with the
They
pool?
just they just took someone's house. That's nobody's house.
I,
And
I I'm almost thinking it was Sloane's house and like she knew her parents were away. That's the only thing that makes sense. Because where else would she have gotten the bathing suit from? Cuz
yeah, but they also had bathing suits too.
uh yeah, or were they bathing suits or were they just their boxer briefs? Cuz Cameron was in full clothes, wasn't he?
The plot of the film that we're not going to question
Anyways,
because we
so
don't know.
so yeah, Ferris and Sloane are having the greatest time in the hot tub, and Cameron's just like sitting on the edge of the diving board, like regretting his whole existence. Like, oh my god, my dad's gonna see the mileage. I'm gonna get caught. It's all over. And then he ends up he ends up diving in or falling into the pool and just kind of chills at the bottom as he sinks. And then Ferris goes in and tries to save him and thinking that he's legitimately drowning. And then when they bring him to the surface, Cameron fakes it the whole time, just like Squints did in Sandlot, with Wendy Peppercorn's character as the lifeguard. and uh, and Cameron's like, Ferris Bueller, you're my hero. And Ferris like, oh, you son of a bitch, you were faking it.
What was it like? He sits there at the bottom of the pool, and then he kind of does this like little look upward, like, "Oh, you gonna come get me, or am I just gonna let myself drown?" And I think he just wanted to.
Wanted attention in a way, or
Yeah, obviously wanted attention, but he kind of wanted to pull Ferris's strings and put him in a stressful situation.
which he does, you know.
Yeah, and,
Um,
and this is kind of where the movie, in my opinion, kind of like drags a little bit because
Because then it
I
jumps
feel
over
like
to Genie, right? For filler.
no, I like Jeannie's bit. Like I like that. I think it's like the shocked bit, which he even talks about. He goes like, "Hey, I need him to like loosen up and." I don't want him to get with the first girl he lays because then she's going to treat him like shit. Like he's like, I
Mm-hmm.
need to like get him out of his shell so that he can actually handle being an adult or handle being like his own independent self. He's like, oh, if his roommate, what was it? He's like, if he comes into college acting like this, his roommate's going to kill him. So he's like doing, putting him through all the situations so that he can, function normally once he's on his own.
Right.
But I'm thinking like the part of like the pool when they start talking, and then when they're back at the garage, I feel like that just kind of goes like almost like 30 seconds, a little longer than it needs to. Like they just, I mean, maybe that's what the director wanted. Like they wanted us to sit in that moment because it was really important. But I just felt like it could have just been a little bit quicker because I felt like my attention was kind of waning because it's like, he's all like, all right, I think I'm over it. And then it reverts back to him freaking out when he sees that the mileage is being added back on. And then
Oh, when they
he
put the car in reverse, right?
Yeah, and then he starts going on this rant and he starts beating up the bumper of the car. And you know, then he kind of gets over it. And then he finally like he keeps having this dialogue back and forth, and then he leans over and then the kind of his character climax happens, and he's like, you know what, me and dad are gonna have a long chat, I'll take this on. And it's like, okay. But I just felt like it went a little long, like I was kind of losing attention. But Jeannie's whole thing at the police station is, I mean, exactly what that character needs is she has this guy who's like, I see what your problem's you.
Garth's character, right?
You keep thinking about what other people care about you,
Mm-hmm.
and you should just live your own life. You shouldn't be concerned about what other people are doing.
Right.
Although I'm surprised they were making out. I'm surprised the mom didn't freak out about that part.
The mom was like so inconvenienced by her having to like leave work, which we also find out that she misses out on a real estate deal.
I was gonna say, well, she missed out on the Vermont people. She couldn't close the deal with the Vermont people. How dare she?
How
But
dare she?
like
Exactly.
she has to like pick up her daughter from jail, and then while in jail and being like, I can't believe this happened, she comes out and her daughter's making out with some dude who's like some druggy dude who she's never met. Like oh my god, like I feel like that was an under performance or an underreaction of I feel like any other parent would be furious of just the fact having to go to the police station, let alone finding her making out with Charlie Sheen of all people.
Right. And but what's interesting is how you see almost like an immediate character change with Jeannie after that, because then now she's not so. I mean, she's still focused and hell bent on her brother getting away with stuff, with the leading up scenes after that. But for a moment, she is like laughing. She's happy. She's giddy. I mean, it could also be that she was making out with Charlie Sheen. But the thing is that for that brief moment, she was taken out of her own existence and actually had a real conversation with another human being that she's never met before. But it was authentic. Everything about that was authentic.
Well,
And
definitely, she definitely had kind of like this epiphany, and someone was actually calling her out on her shit. And you know what? Frankly, someone actually listening to her. I think that was kind of the
that's
thing
what
for
it was. Yeah, I think so. Because maybe she felt like she was being heard for the first time. Because her parents don't give her that same satisfaction, possibly.
yeah.
Um,
Which I think no, she is the younger sister. She has to be because Ferris is a senior.
she is.
She is the younger sister.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, and so after that, after the scene of Jeannie and Ferris's mom, or their mom, leaving the police station, they're about to go home. Jeannie's driving, obviously, because she's the one that got the car.
Well, and then
And
obviously there's that moment with Fry, and they kind of close out that arc with him, and then, but also before that is the moment with Sloane and Ferris, where they play that song. I'm trying to remember what the song was called. My favorite song of that movie. Oh, The Edge of Forever. I had that song on my iPod for years. It's the one where it's Sloane and Ferris in her backyard,
yeah,
and they're kind of just talking about. And I think what one of the best lines is she's like, "You knew what you were gonna do today when you woke up this morning, didn't you?" And he's like, "Oh yeah," and then he goes and kisses her, which again, that's part of what he knew what he was doing. And yeah, and so like that kind of nice slow moment to get kind of close out Sloane's character, and him realizing, oh, it's almost 6, I gotta go, and he starts running away, and then she kind of is like, oh, he is, like he wasn't just he had a plan. Like I think the whole movie you're kind of like, oh, he's just winging it, he's doing whatever.
Right.
Because I think there's two spectrums of like, oh, there's people who are, you know, they're present, but they're also irresponsible. Like they're not planning, they're just kind of doing what meets their
Go with the
immediate.
flow, right?
Yeah, go with the flow, very impulsive, but that can also come off as very just kind of almost immature, not sustainable behavior or not
Mm-hmm.
healthy behavior. But when she says that line and he goes to like kiss her, her realizing, oh, everything he did is he like tailored this day. So he did do the work. He intentionally wanted to do this. He intentionally wanted to do all the things. Some of it maybe not as planned forward, but he had a mindset of how he wanted to tackle the day. And that kind of then goes into, okay, he planned that day out. He's serious enough to plan his future. Like he's not just some guy who doesn't care about anything and has no ambition. Like he's someone who can be present and be ambitious. Like
Yeah.
he has drive. And that's where she kind of starts connecting. Oh, maybe I do have a future. And that's, and then her remembering that conversation about the marriage thing. That wasn't just an impulse of him just asking that. He asked that for a reason. And that's when he hops off the fence and he says, I love you. And then he says, I love you too, which kind of reaffirms the thought. And then she goes, he's going to marry me.
Yep. She
And
does. Yeah. And I
it's
thought
such
that
a,
was really sweet.
yeah, it's such a great, it's not just Ferris and his buddies being dragged along. And like, there's consideration for it. So I really like that scene.
Isn't she a junior though? Like she still has one more year of
Yeah,
high
I
school,
don't
right?
think she's a senior. I think she's a junior.
But Ferris and Cameron definitely are seniors. And
Yeah,
there's
they're definitely gonna graduate.
yeah, and there's scenes where even Sloane will ask Cameron like, what is it that you're interested in? And they both say like I don't know. Like I don't know. And Sloane says me too. And I feel like that's also very relatable. I still feel like we're at that age where we're still discovering who we are, what we want to be, and how that fits with our own identity. Amron and Sloane, where it's like we're still figuring it out. Some people have it at an earlier age, and some take a longer time to develop. And I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing. I feel like we all have our own timeline on which things we want to achieve at a certain age. What do you have to say about that?
I think Ferris is very. I mean, one, he's very self-aware. I mean, it's very apparent with all the fourth wall breaking. But I
Mm-hmm.
think he's not a prisoner of his own ambition.
Yes.
So I feel like, or his own expectations, and so I feel like, well, I think there's so much urgency to try to figure out your sense of self. I mean, I definitely can relate to that. And then you also feel the urgency of like ambition of I need to amount to something. I need to be something, and I need to have it figured out. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that has become it's a very soft underlying theme of this film, but it's a very even more today. It's very relevant
Yeah.
in terms of you don't need to have things figured out. You don't need to like be planning out your whole life already. Like in terms of having this plan, like you can just kind of go about it day by day and just being in the moment.
Right.
And but society and growing up kind of it's hard to do that and it takes a toll and then things, your character changes and you start getting older and not saying growing up, but you're getting older and your priorities change and there's countless people who are in that mindset and then they don't, they go, I just blink, I didn't even realize it, but now I got a mortgage and kids and I can't think that way anymore. Like
Yeah.
I have responsibilities now, I have obligations now, and not even that, but like, I mean, the most obvious one is just your parents' generation is just getting older, looming around with that inherent responsibility. And so um, it's something I think there's some factors of this film that kids can't relate to, but then there's some that if they really pay attention and if they watch it more than once and if they
Mm-hmm.
watch different stages of their life, they will really pay attention to. And it's kind of like these really abstract themes that like Breakfast Club also has, because Breakfast Club also has kind of like a theme of this being a prisoner of your own future, of your own like expectations and ambition, because they're all freaking out about like I need to be this and I need to be better. My old man wants me to do this and I have to figure out what I want to do when I get out of here. And like they're almost dreading it because they're like it's this prison of this thing I'm not looking forward to, because then it's this I have to make this responsibility and this decision, and that's it's set in stone. It's
R-
cemented.
right. And I mean, I think you nailed it right on the head because it is a prisoner of your parents' expectations or your own expectations of yourself. And I feel like we can be so critical of I mean, I feel like we ourselves as an individual aspect are our own worst critic. I mean, um, and I feel like it underlies the issue of us thinking that we need to be somewhere where we aren't mentally or financially, whatever the situation may be, where you feel like you're not there or you're not enough to be there yet. And this is another issue of what I wanted to bring up with leaders. Like the whole thing that I brought up earlier with the expectations of if you're not a leader in your field, you're not successful. I don't buy into that. Not everyone is not everyone is equipped to be a leader. Um, because if you have too many leaders in the world, well, who are you going to lead if everyone's a leader? You know what I mean? And then I feel like there's more conflict in that because everyone wants to be um, on top of their game and be the best in their field. But then again, there are some people that their own personalities don't fit the mold of being a leader. Is that we may not all be equipped to be a leader. And I feel that Cameron may feel that, Jeannie may feel that in this movie. We don't think that Ferris feels that because of his overall persona. Like, he's not really worried. Like, you can see him in any position and he would fake it till he makes it, sort of way. Um, and also, I think that's, I think that's also relatable, fake it till you make it. But,
Well, I think yeah, and to dive into that, I
mm-hmm,
think there's also I think there's like two kinds of people where you either have a group. Well, I think we have way too many people who have answers, and I fall into this category many times where everyone has an answer and an explanation for everything.
mm-hmm,
No one is comfortable saying I don't know. I don't know what my path's going to be. I don't really know anything about that. I don't really, I don't have a thought about that. Everyone's got an opinion. Everyone's got a voice about everything. And then also there's this like hustle culture where everyone is selling you what they're doing. So it doesn't like everyone's got this fear of just idolization. So like, you talk to someone and they're like, it's those classic, there was this new show that came on, and this guy he comes into and it's these guys are just they're blue collar workers, and
mm-hmm.
a high school friend comes in, he goes, oh, I have my own company now, and but then he just starts soliciting his hustle life, and it capitalizes or captivates like what that tone is, because he's like, oh yeah, and I make sure I get up at 5 in the morning and I do my workout, and then for my diet, and like it's this over explanation of like,
Yeah,
and eat this certain way, and then I work on my journaling, and then after that I work on like my this project, and I do this project, and I do this, and like it's in the same vein where like you hear about parents who are putting their kids through so many activities, you don't give them a second to just breathe and process. I
right.
mean, you and me have traveled together, and obviously we aren't, to refer, we're not experts in anything, and we don't know everything. But one of the reasons I say, hey, let's take a day where we just don't do anything, is just to like absorb what we've been doing.
Right.
And I feel like we don't do that in our day-to-day lives, and we don't do that with our projects, because it's like, oh, well, I'm working on this now, and I'm working on this, and I'm doing this, and it's just you're never stopping.
Yeah.
And you're never yeah, look, you're never stopping to look around once in a while. You're so fixated on all of your activities and all of your things, and a lot of it's very future oriented. It's like that it's with the notion that like I'm doing this to improve, to make my future self better, which is a good trait to have, but like moderation's also important. And I think I think us as a society is totally out of whack with that. And I fall into that same category. I think I'm totally out of whack with like being so future oriented. And so it actually was really refreshing to watch this movie and just kind of slow down for a little bit.
Well, what you said also brings up something that Alan Watts said about being present. If you can't embrace the present, then the future is a hoax because you miss the whole thing, what's going on in front of you. And his whole philosophy on life itself is the purpose of life is to live. Just as if it were to be explained as the purpose of dance is to dance. You don't think of which move to start with, you just start doing it. And just like you don't focus on breathing unless you're meditating, but you don't think of breathing, you just automatically do it. And that's his whole philosophy on living life. Like no one's telling you to go on living or to not. Like you have total control in that. The issue is what do you want to live for? And I feel that we each burden ourselves with an image of what we should be at this stage of our life, or just in general, the character that we want to uphold by, or the image that our parents have for us to live by. Sometimes it doesn't fit the mold of what we actually feel inside. And I think that, you know, I really respect watching this movie now and feeling. I mean, I still get that nostalgia factor from remembering when I watched it because this is one of those guilty pleasure movies for me. Like when I was younger, I used to watch it when I was sick. Ironically, if I was gonna fake being sick, I would always go with the stomach cramp. I would always go with, oh, I'm having a gut issue. Oh, I'm calling out because I have I'm dealing with some stuff. But um, no, never licking the palms. I really like what you said about the whole expectation thing because I feel that that's what's also holding us back. And if I can expand on that, we are told that we should be something else, and we don't feel that. It's like we're almost letting that person down that tells us you're meant to do this, or I see you doing this. It's like, yeah, but I'm not there. Like I can't see that for me personally. But I still feel that at certain points of everyone's lives, we pander and we reminisce and we think about what we wanted to be as a kid and what we are now. And does that fit? Does that coincide with what we believed that we would be at? It's like if you grew up thinking that you were going to be like an astronaut or doing this and then you haven't taken by the time you got to college you weren't studying that field, like are you feeling worse or bad about bad about yourself because you weren't living up to the expectation that you had as a kid with that mentality at the time? I don't feel that way. Like I still feel like there are things that I want to learn and want to dive into, and I'm thankful that we both have the time to figure that out. Because I still feel like we're at that age where we're still figuring out what we want to do. We know what we're good at. We know what we'd like to get into, but we don't know what's actually going to make us in this life. I don't know. That may just be personally, but I mean, what do you feel about that? Like,
Well, we could always be this never-ending portrait because there's people who still don't aren't there's people who literally open businesses and find their passion at like the age of 80. So I think it's removed that kind of connotation of like, oh, we're at, like by our midlife, we're gonna figure out what our identity is. Like, no, your identity can be visual, but it's also ever evolving.
mm-hmm,
It's like watching a motion picture that's just a constant show that just keeps going.
right,
But um, but yeah, so I'm trying to remember at what point we're in the film at. Oh, this is when we're talking about when he's leaving Sloan,
yeah,
and then he's running. And by the way, he has the "I love you" is such a drive-by moment where he's just like, while he's like, "Oh, I love you too," like it was like as if he'd never said it before.
mm-hmm,
And I love how she's all like, "He's gonna marry me,"
yeah,
then in like a minute, he's running by two girls sunbathing, and then he turns around and he's like, "Hey, how's it going? I'm Ferris Bueller." I'm just like, okay. I'm like, oh, that sounds like a really sturdy relationship we got here.
Well, before we get to the conclusion, I did want to bring up the whole arc of Cameron finally like coming out of his shell and embracing like, you know what? I need to face the music. I want to face the music now. I feel like that concludes his arc cuz now he feels, I wouldn't say confident, but he feels comfortable embracing the discomfort of the conflict that he's been avoiding most of his life.
He
And
he he has prioritized the right decision versus the comfortable one.
right. I really like the way they ended Cameron's arc. And then now we have, Ferris trying to get home in time before his parents do. And Jeannie and Mom are driving back to the house. Jeannie stops. And this is the thing that kills me is throughout the movie we see the dad within proximity of Ferris not noticing him, and then we see the mom not noticing Ferris when he's right in front of the car as Jeannie stops, and you see the look in her eyes like, oh, like her eyes squint. She's like, oh, I fucking got you. Like you're done, you're cooked. And um and then the mom's just like oblivious to what's in front of her, and she's just like scolding Jeannie. And that's also attributing to the relationship that she has with Jeannie and how controlling and how decisive she is, how Jeannie makes her decisions. Um, and she's just like scolding her in the passenger seat, doesn't even realize Ferris is in front of her. Ferris goes away, and then Jeannie's now trying to like speed to get home. And then what happens? A cop pulls up right behind them, right?
Oh, and they go through this whole. I thought like the cop pulled them over at the house. It's like no, they went through the whole speeding ticket while he was running home.
Right. So it's all happened off screen, but we do see a cop following them after Jeannie starts speeding away. And
Yeah.
something that we didn't really mention is um, during the course of the friends having the day in Chicago, Ed Rooney is like last seen at the arcade, and then he is seen going to Ferris's house while Jeannie is home, breaks in with the spare key in the back door, gets past the dog after getting his leg munched on. The other thing that leads up to that is, like, first of all, the principal of the school, what sort of authority does he really think he has outside of the school district? Like, full access to people's houses. Like, when have you ever seen that in real life? A principal
Oh no,
breaking
he's
into your
totally using
house?
he's totally using an unethical approach. I think what's wild is what's at the end is when he's trying to Ferris is trying to get finally this whole chase scene happens. He goes through, does the trampoline thing, and he gets to the back door
Gets
which
to the
is
back
locked. And
door finally. Yep.
he goes for the key, and the principal has the key, and he's like, "I got you." And a part of me's kind of like, "Do you have him though? He's at his house.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are you gonna do?" Like, I mean, it's more maybe his confirmation, but like, if anyone challenges that, I mean, it's gonna be, that's gonna be a hard thing not to defend.
It would
I
look
mean,
it would look
home.
really bad on Edward Rooney's character. It's like, well, what were you doing at your student's house?
Yeah,
Well,
you're trespassing this house.
mm-hmm.
And I think this is kind of where the means to the end theme applies or tone applies because he's like, I'm breaking and doing all these illegal things to just prove that I'm right, that I'm not crazy, that like, no, this kid is not going to get away with this, that he's going to quote unquote be caught doing bad things. Now, if it actually amounts to anything in terms of punishment, that's debated. But like, he's like, I'm going to break into this house and prove that this kid is bullshit. And then when he finds where he's trying to get in the back door and he can't get in, he's wearing outside clothes, and the principal's like, "I got you, little bastard."
Mm-hmm.
It's this like it's kind of this. Well, you got him. I mean, you're right. He has been bullshitting. He's got him off, and maybe you can get away with something, but you're kind of waiting for like what? How is he going to tie this where it's actually going to amount to a punishment? But then the sister opens the freaking back door and starts being like, "Oh, there's a witness who." oh, you are still sick and you tried to walk home from the hospital. So it's just adding this case that Edward Rooney is no way going to be able to defend because it's like, oh, I got you. And then she's like, oh, he was coming back from the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Why is he out here? This is so silly of him. Oh, these kids. And then it's the final nail in the coffin. By the way, you left your phone in the house.
No, the
So
wallet. He left his wallet.
or wallet. He's left his wallet, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I caught you. So like, you can't say shit because if you do, then we say, well, why are we? Oh, by the way, we had your wallet in the house, so you can't like do anything about it. And he realized that he was cornered and duped, and then that's kind of where his arc ends. And and then like once that all happens, Ferris starts running up and frantically getting into his room, moving the mannequin, which they never question, by the way. The mom opens the door and sees this dark skinned arm
By the
laying
way,
in
yeah.
it's just an exposed arm and it's like it's not even the color, it's just the joints on it. It's like it's got this exposed mannequin arm and she doesn't notice that.
No.
But he pushes out, gets in the bed, takes his shoes off, and then the classic. I like the little payoff of the sleep machine's still on. Wait, I got a baseball from the game
That
I
I caught
caught.
earlier. Yes.
Oh, that was a great payoff. And then they're like, "Oh, you're sick," and oh, blah blah blah, and then it has this happy ending, and
Well,
it's just
the thing I was gonna mention about Jeannie's character is she doesn't actually have compassion for Ferris until she sees him in that confrontation with Rooney.
oh, he's
Uh,
in a vulnerable spot where she actually has power over him.
right, because she notices like, oh, Ferris has been made, and if I don't intervene, he will end up having to go through high school another year, and Ed Rooney is going to get his way in holding him back, which the grounds for that are debatable, but at least that can be proven, right? Because Ferris is already like changed in the school system that he's only been absent 2 days, so it's really just Rooney's word against theirs. But the fact that yes, when Jeannie opens the door, she embraces like her brother for almost as if it feels for the first time, like showing him compassion and letting him go through the house while the parents. And this is the thing that kills me, is when the parents come through earlier in the film. There's a flower delivery service that comes to the door and drops off all these flowers and balloons that are in the house all of a sudden, and both mom and dad are like looking around. They're investigating the bottom floor, but I swear it shows them going up the stairs when Ferris is still downstairs. So I was just wondering, like, well, what were the parents doing during that whole conversation that Jeannie was having at the back door with Ferris and
No,
Rooney?
no, she was talking about. She's like, I had to pick up, and so I think they were talking about the day,
Right, no,
because
they were. I feel like they already showed them walking up the stairs, but maybe they cut it to a point where it made it seem like Ferris was the first one upstairs, and then they went to go check on him at that point. But
I
I
think he was the first one upstairs.
okay. Um,
By the way,
hmm.
by the way, the one scene we forgot, which I don't I want to know what this lady does, is when Edward Rooney opens the door and there's that telegram of that nurse and then all those dudes who are like giving flowers and balloons, and she's all
Yes.
like, "Are you feeling ill?" Because I'm the girl that, and I'm like, What do you do? What is this lady doing? What
Yeah. First of all, who?
what
Yeah.
is she saying that she likes to do? I'm like, and that's inappropriate if I'm putting two and two together. I'm like, what in the world?
Yeah. It cuts out right before she's about to say the word that like. All of us know what word she's about to say, but they cut it right before that. And yeah, that I thought that was pretty funny. And he was the one that opened the door for that, right?
Yeah,
Rooney, when he was there earlier,
yeah.
chasing Jeannie. Okay, so so now at the conclusion, the parents see Ferris in the bed, and they're like, "Oh, okay, we'll make you some soup," and Ferris is talking like a baby, and getting away with it. Closing out the movie, we have the last scenes showing Ed Rooney. Like he's all like, not only is he like disheveled looking at this point, his suit is tattered, shoe his shoe is all scuffed up from the dog attacking him, and he's got cuts and bruises on his face already. So like, how are you going to go to school the next day and explain what happened? You know? But the bus driver, the school bus driver for I'm guessing the elementary school,
No, I think it's the high school.
but these kids don't look like they're in high school though.
I think they are though because they
Okay.
all know him. They all look at him like as if they know him.
Okay.
And
Um
so, and I think that's the closest representation to high school because I think those were the actual high school kids.
mhm.
And I do laugh because like he sits there, you know, she sits next to that girl and she's like, I bet you this is the first time you've ever been in a real school bus before.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, I bet you he has. Like, I bet you he's done that. And they sit. He sits in that seat, and they do not move for like a good 2 minutes. And I'm like,
No. I
what
and,
is this bus driver doing?
and honestly, no, I was thinking the same thing when I was watching it because first of all, when the school bus driver's like, "Hey Rooney, you need a ride. What happened to you? You need a ride?" And he like debates getting on the bus for I
I would have just
swear like
kept
a
walking.
solid minute. It's like,
I would
dude,
have
just
just
get
kept
on.
walking. I would
And
have just
then
kept walking.
and then yeah, the girl that he ends up sitting next to, she's like, "You want you want a gummy bear? They're warm. They've been in my pocket." It's like first of all gross, but but secondly, like yeah, you're right. Like I feel like the camera lingers way too long. Like this scene is a lot longer than I feel it needs to be because all the kids are just like it's showing the facial expressions of all these kids like looking at Rooney like they can't believe that the principal is on their bus and he looks this way. And it cuts to like a few students on that bus specifically that the one boy, did you notice it? Like he was just like giving him the eye, like hopefully that Ed Rooney doesn't look over to him because he has on his binder it says like save Ferris. And as soon as Rooney like glances over to the kid and sees it, his eyes roll, and which shows the the lack of enthusiasm he has for the character. I just thought that was really funny. But yeah, and then after like 2 minutes, the bus driver finally takes off, and oh my god, that was just funny. And also, um, did you also know that the actor? I want to say, I mean, in a dick way, foreshadowing.
No, I do know.
Okay.
I've heard. We won't have to say much about it, but yeah, yeah, his career kind of went through a decline
In
in 2000.
2002 for certain allegations that came out about him, and it's like, oh, well, we also saw a scene in this movie that referenced that, so kind of interesting. Um, but the after the credits roll, um, we have a last scene with Ferris,
He's in some kind of bathrobe.
and he like looks at the camera as he's done earlier in the film, and he's like, "Oh, you're still here? The movie's over. Go home." And as he like awkwardly like shuffles out of the hallway, out of the line of sight of the camera. And I really like that. I really liked the fourth wall breaking in this movie, because it is almost like, hey, it's a reminder to enjoy the little things. Like Ferris's character is there to remind us what things we need to latch onto, to remember as we age, because nothing good really lasts, especially for those small moments where we think back to. Like for example, in the, I mean, I've seen several reels that have the same caption. Do you remember the last time that you and all your friends like played a game of ball or like played a game for the last time? And did you think that was going to be your last time? Like that statement hits me hard cuz I don't think about that until now at this stage in life. It's like, well, when was the last time I actually like played a game of ball or interacted in a setting where we weren't really worried about the future. We were just embracing that moment. I feel like you and I have that a lot. So I don't have any room for complaints, but just retrospectively, like, would you agree that some people think about that? Like, oh, like, I didn't realize at 14 years old that was the last time I was ever going to be playing, um, like, playing games with these friends. And then life happens naturally, right?
I think that's mainly relevant for people when there's someone who's about to pass away.
Mm,
You have those where you kind of are like, oh, that's the last time I'm going to see you ever again.
yeah.
Where you feel like, oh, this person who's maybe in poor health or at an age where you think, you don't see him enough, and with just kind of deducting, oh, I don't see you in this time period, I'm probably not going to ever see you again. So I think those are the ones that are much more not relevant, but much more noticeable to me.
This movie to me still, I still cherish this movie. It's definitely going to be on my top 50 list. Um, but I'm so glad that I rewatched it.
Same.
Because it reminds me of how much I loved it at the age I last watched it, to the point now where it's like, oh, all of this stuff is so relative. Even though the characters portrayed are supposed to be in their teenage years, but the dialogue that's shared between the characters, I still feel transgresses time. Anyways, that was our discussion of Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Was there anything I will say, like for um, closing statements? Was there anything in this movie during this rewatch that you feel means more to you now than it did the last time you watched it?
I think there's certain statements that are said as just general statements to the audience that I think that as you get older, it's kind of like when your parents tell you a life lesson, and you're like, yeah, 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 whatever. And then you get older and you hear it again, and you're like, oh, absolutely.
Because
I know
you've had
exactly
the
what
life
it is.
experience to go through it, what they were telling you
So,
about.
I mean, the classic line of him being like, life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around for a while, you'll miss it. When you're younger, you're kind of like, yeah, 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 okay, whatever. Like, I'm living my life. And then, once, add 15 years and you're like, oh my God, I totally just, where did that go?
Yeah,
Where did that time go? And then that's going to happen to me again in another 10 years. I'm going to be like, God, where did that go?
right.
Oh my God.
Because we're
And like,
we're
what am I remembering? Oh,
yeah, because we're oh my god, I know. Because we're so focused in on what our daily tasks are, or what our routines are, and you're right. Like sometimes we do miss the little joys in life, and I feel like whenever we have a moment to recapture that sense of youth, where there's no, we're not fearing the repercussions of tomorrow. I mean, obviously it should be taken lightly, but also serious in a serious on the tone of embracing. I think this is more important, is embracing our youth while we have it, because we're taking, I mean, I feel like we've taken it for granted for such a long time until we do get older and we notice that, oh, I'm not just achy at the end of the day, I'm achy all day. Like I'm not looking forward to that, but I do know that my body like cracks a lot more even when I bend down to get something. It's like, oh my god, that's my knees. I no longer have those fresh out of the box knees anymore. Or when you get out of bed and you like, you twist to get up, and you're like, oh my god, like what's happening? um but it's all a part of life, and I embrace it, and I think it's not just a pleasure, but a gift to grow old. And I do hope that that happens. Thank you all for listening to our discussion of Ferris Bueller's Day Off. We hope you enjoyed it. And Jacob, I hope to have you on again sometime for another future movie. I know there's a
thank
lot on our list that we can talk about, but I loved
Absolutely.
everything about tonight.
Perfect. Well, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. It was actually half the fun was just watching the film again. So thank you for letting me watch the film again.
Exactly. All right, everyone. Until next time, take care.